All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll wait for a few people to log on here. Thanks for joining. Dr. Ruff's on. Congratulations, Dr. Ruff. Looking forward to the big party. Gotta let us know the dates for that. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Twyman. I'm a board certified cardiologist and a heart attack and stroke prevention expert. Tonight, we're going to chat a little bit about how sunlight and nutrition really charges up your mitochondria. And so this is kind of the second phase of my 4 pillars of optimal health. So last week we talked about sleep. So if you haven't watched that one, it's on my Instagram TV as well as my YouTube channel. So tonight, mostly going to focus on nutrition. So I'm not a nutritionist, and as you've known, if you've seen me for a while in the office, that I'm not, hardcore proponent of any particular diet. I work with each individual and find out, what's important to them, and then kind of fine-tune a regimen for them. But to back up, the sun is the most important nutrient. So the sun grows all the food webs that you eat. So either the sunlight grows the plants that you eat, or you eat the animals that eat the plants. So if it comes in a box or can, that's not real food. So you want to try to eat whatever you could have eaten 200 to 300 years ago. That's usually the number one tip. You also know that I'm very big into circadian biology, or controlling your 24-hour cycles. So there's 2 Zeitgebers that really control your 24-hour cycles. You've heard me frequently talk about the light that enters your eyes and hits your skin. Just as a refresher, your skin is basically a solar panel, and all your hormones and neurotransmitters get set by the time of day that the nutrients come into your mouth and hit your liver and gut, but also at the time that the sun hits your eyes and hits your skin. So the thing I want to talk more about tonight is a little bit more about some macronutrients and some of my kind of fine-tuned tips on nutrition. So first off, I always talk about circadian biology. I already kind of went through that. But ideally, you do not want to be eating 24 hours a day. Your liver and gut need time off. So I usually recommend people follow at least a 12-hour feeding window or less. So whatever time of day you start eating, be done 12 hours after that point. Water's fine 24 hours a day. If you're a little bit healthier, you might be able to go into a tighter window. I'm not necessarily going to get into intermittent fasting, which is not even that great of a term. I'm not going to go into kind of the water only fast tonight. That's going to be a kind of an advanced topic later on. This is just kind of general nutrition guidelines. So if you've kind of timed your meals into that 12-hour window, that's the first step. Likely you should only be eating from sun up to sundown, only eating when the light is out, and ideally eating outside if at all possible, because you want to match what your skin and eye are seeing to what your gut is seeing. So if you're inside under artificial light, your skin and eyes get a different message than what your gut is getting. You've frequently heard me also talk about seasonal eating. So 200 years ago, unless you canned some food or had stuff dried in the shed, you ate what was locally available to you. So if you couldn't hunt it, fish it, or farm it, you didn't eat it that time of year. And the reason is that your body is in tune with nature. So the sun grows your food. Your body basically decodes that information. So the sunlight charges up the electrons in the food. Then your body breaks down the food ultimately into protons and electrons. Your mitochondria, the organelles in your cells that make energy for you, they're decoding that light information from the environment. So this is the reason why it's not wise, if you're in a high latitude where it's dark, gray, and cold, to be eating a bunch of pineapples and bananas this time of year if you're in that environment, because those fruits were grown in high light environments. You need a lot of sunlight to grow those carbohydrates. Those electrons in those carbohydrates are highly charged. You put those into your gut is like, oh, it's summertime. You go outside and it's freezing. Your skin is like, it's wintertime. There's a mismatch. That mismatch can increase inflammation in your system. So you want to be eating what's locally available to you. So yes, if you're in a higher latitude, you're probably going to be more keto, paleo in the wintertime, because you wouldn't have had access to as many vegetables and fruits that time of year. In the summertime, when the vegetables and fruits are more in season, you would have had more carbohydrates that time of year. So that's kind of the basics. Seasonal eating, circadian biology. All right, next, macros. So one of my good friends and colleagues, Dr. Lyon, if you don't already follow her, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, she's the protein expert that I've learned a lot of this information from. She has a concept called muscle-centric medicine, and that your muscles are your organs of longevity. So many people are not over fat, they're under muscle. So if you focus on optimizing your muscle health, you'll optimize your metabolism. So focus on your getting high quality protein first. Animal protein is different than plant protein. This isn't a debate, should you be keto, carnivore, or vegan? You need high quality protein from whatever source. And bare minimum, you need at least 90 grams of protein a day. So how would you break that up? By their recommendations, generally 40 to 45 grams of protein at the first meal of the day. If that's your breakfast, then that's literally what it is. You're breaking your overnight fast. So that's when you're mostly catabolic breaking down. You reload with protein. That stimulates the muscles. It stimulates muscle protein synthesis. The other thing that stimulates your muscle protein synthesis is resistance strength training. So those are the two things you need, especially as you age, to keep your muscles healthy, is getting high quality protein in the right concentration and stimulating the muscles with strength training. After you get your base of protein, your carbohydrates are based off essentially your metabolic flexibility to begin with. So are you diabetic? You're going to not need as many carbohydrates because high glucose is going to be toxic to certain cells. If you're relatively fit, you might get by with a lot more carbohydrates. So it is very individualized. There's no carbohydrate dose I can tell you to absolutely take, other than for most people, they probably should keep under 40 grams per serving. I'd previously done stories about the 24-hour continuous glucose monitor. That's probably the best way to know, even if you're not diabetic or pre-diabetic, how many carbohydrates you can actually tolerate. Again, carbohydrates are mostly a spring and summer phenomenon if you're in the high northern latitudes. If you're at the equator, you can eat those things year-round because they're around year-round. But anyway, the carbohydrate, high energy. Your muscles, 80% of it is going to be disposed of in your muscles. So if you don't exercise, your glucose is not likely to be optimized. So you eat as much carbohydrates as your muscles require. If you're sedentary, you shouldn't be eating as many carbohydrates for the most part. Then fats, as long as they're the way Mother Nature intended them, they're not going to necessarily cause you an issue. It's when you're frying things up or denaturing them, that's when you're going to get yourself into trouble. But the biggest thing that you should consider on your fats thing is making sure you're getting enough high quality omega-3s, especially the DHA component of the omega-3. It's very important for brain health. And DHA is also the very important omega-3 that helps you transmit light from the environment through your eye into energy into your system. So you can think of DHA as kind of the insulation to the wiring system. This is not exactly right, but sometimes I tell patients, like if you have low DHA, it's like you have a half-charged phone. You're not going to be able to charge up your batteries as efficiently. So you want to have high DHA, getting it by eating seafood. How often? As much as you need to get your blood levels high enough. You can get that checked on a routine blood test. The Omega Check from Quest does it. If your levels are high enough by getting it through dietary sources, you're doing it right. And then the rest of your calories are based off of what your true goals are. If you're trying to add on weight, you're going to need to be in a caloric excess. If you're trying to lose weight, you're going to have to be in a caloric deficit. But I'm not really big into necessarily counting calories. It's mostly getting your macros, ballpark right, matching it to your level of activity and where you're at in the world. One thing that some of my patients will see that I'm asking in the office now is about their maternal haplotype. You can get that off 23andMe. The maternal haplotype is essentially where your maternal mitochondria originally came from. If you have a very northern latitude haplotype, you're more prone to benefiting from cold therapy and then sunlight in the summertime. If you have a more equatorial haplotype, you can get away with eating more carbohydrates year-round. Your mitochondria are more efficient at that. So it gives you a rough estimate of what nutrition regimen you more likely benefit from. But again, it's test, don't guess. There is no perfect diet for each person. You have to put the plan into action and then remeasure. So that's what I'm going to hit upon tonight is, what my nutrition goals for 2021 for patients would be. And that always remember that the light environment comes first. So I will open it up to any questions that people have tonight. And then next week, the plan will be likely chatting about optimal exercise. I'll actually be doing that one on location down in Cancun, Mexico. It's time for me to go for a sun run and build up some more vitamin D. All right. First, I have a question: is there a benefit to full spectrum light? That's the only benefit, as you want to get full spectrum light. Mother Nature has that in sunlight. There is no specific artificial lights that are going to be completely full spectrum. People are watching me right now. My room looks like a submarine. I'm using different photobomb modulation devices. Then I have a fairly inexpensive red LED and a lamp to the side of me just to keep the room light enough that I can see and walk through it. Then I do have some UV lights as well, UVA bulbs, but I typically only use those during daylight hours mainly. And then I do have a UV bulb, a UVB lamp, but that one you definitely have to follow directions from the manufacturer because you could potentially injure yourself if you don't use that thing right. Question: what snacks are high in vitamin D? There's not many that are super high in vitamin D. I mean, mushrooms would be one source, but optimally you want to get vitamin D from the sunlight because there's about 800 or 900 other compounds that sunlight's going to be producing as the light hits your skin and acts with cholesterol. So you're turning cholesterol into vitamin D on your skin. Question: does cod liver oil provide enough DHA? You'd have to really look at the bottle and see how much DHA is in the product. You're generally shooting for about 3,000 milligrams or 3 grams a day of combined EPA and DHA. One challenge with cod liver oil is you got to be careful about the vitamin A content in it. So double check on what the dosage of the vitamin A is. You do not want to be taking excessively high doses of vitamin A because it will pull down your vitamin D levels. So I won't know your full context, so this is not medical advice. This is more kind of a general recommendation. But what do I suggest for somebody who's at a high latitude, male over 40, not much light, cold temperatures? That's the time of year you're likely to be more ketotic. So focus on the high quality proteins as the base, and then sprinkle in whatever fats you need to hit your caloric needs. Not saying eat zero carbohydrates, but you would not be a high carb diet that type of year unless you're extremely physically active. Question: yeah, I made a case for moving south. Absolutely. Your ancestors moved out of, and I'm just saying ancestors in general, moved out of equatorial Africa thousands of years ago. Their mitochondria got less efficient as they went more north because they needed to become warm enough not to freeze to death. So the mitochondria released heat as energy, and they weren't as efficient. So the kind of optimal way to probably do it is, if you are healthy, you might get away with living in multiple environments. But if you're sick, you probably need more sunlight to run your systems. So you do need to go more south so you get more stable quantum yields from the sun. So it's a rough estimate, but if you go to the under the 20th latitude, if you go for 5 days, 6-7 days, that should last you about 6 weeks when you come back north. So this is one of the reasons that the snowbirds probably do have it right, is you run to the sun, you soak it up in the wintertime, and then you go back north whenever you need to go back in the spring, summertime. Question: honestly, I don't know. Any particular medicines that deplete vitamin D? Top of my head, I don't know. Question: same for women. I assume that's probably the same question as the, should they be ketotic? That's probably the time of year, yes. Just kind of put yourself in the position that it's 300 years ago. It's 1721. You walk outside your house. What are you going to eat that day? If you can't catch it, kill it, trap it, fish it, or if you farmed it or stored it up, you weren't eating it that day. So this is the time of year you're probably eating a lot more, skeletal meats, organ meats, and maybe some root vegetables if you stored them up. All right, got a few other people joining in. Thanks for joining tonight. We were just mostly hitting upon how sunlight affects your mitochondria, circadian rhythms, and also some of the ideas I think about how to target your macronutrients. I'm definitely recording this. This will be up on my IGTV when we're done chatting tonight. All right, any other questions again coming in tonight? And for the person that said about case moving south, COVID kind of put a dent in it. In November, I had gone to Cancun and had planned to do a kind of a member retreat. Those are definitely still in the works. So once travel kind of opens back up, that is sort of my plan in the wintertime. I built the Apollo Cardiology to be location independent for myself as well as my patients. So the plan will be going forward that there will be retreats likely in Cancun, likely in Puerto Rico, that patients then can come hang out, soak up some sun. They can have their office visits, where I'm located, and then I can teach them more about circadian biology and just, show them the kind of show and don't tell. Just really show them, how do you get optimal light in your eyes on your skin in the morning time? What would an appropriate breakfast look like? What type of physical activities should you be doing for longevity? So those are definitely coming in 2021. So again, I would have to know your personal contacts. There is no, quote, top supplements everybody should take. It's mostly you want to build up your solar callus in the summertime so that you're ready to kind of fight off any infections in the wintertime. Supplements are literally that. You want to get most of the stuff through your nutrition, your sunlight, and then you top up based off of lab testing. The question, is sunlight only beneficial if it's hitting direct skin? Depends on what you're trying to do with the sunlight. So for vitamin D production, for the most part, yes, your skin has to be in full sunlight. Now, how long? Depends on the darkness of your skin, your Fitzpatrick type. So if you're very, light skinned, freckled, and burn quickly, you probably only need 5-10 minutes. If you're very dark African American, you're going to need 4 or 5 times as much sunlight. There's a good free app called D-Minder Pro. It just tells you what time of day to be outside to optimize your vitamin D exposure. And it bases off GPS to tell you, can you even make vitamin D this time of year? So where I'm sitting in St. Louis, Missouri, it's probably end of January or February where there might be a slight window that you could do it. It's with it comes down to the inclination of the sun or how high the sun is over the horizon. So that's what you need for vitamin D production from UVB. But sunlight in the morning time doesn't have UV, so you're not making vitamin D in the morning time. But that sunlight in the morning helps set your circadian rhythm for the day. It's mostly the blue light in the sun that does that. And you don't necessarily need it absolutely to be hitting your eye, because many days that it's gray outside, but it's the color of the sky and the intensity of the light in the sky that gives your brain basically the signal what time of day it is. So it is beneficial to be outside in sunlight, even if it's not directly hitting your skin. Question about sunscreen. If out all day, again, really depends on your skin type, but the general answer is you don't want to put anything on your skin that you're not willing to put in your mouth and drink, because your skin is going to absorb it. So if it's full of a bunch of estrogen, promoting chemicals, you don't want to be slathering it all over your skin. So a more optimal way would be build up your solar callus. You would just slowly expose yourself to the sun, ideally first thing in the morning, where there is no UV out. Your skin is preconditioned then. When UV comes out later in the day, you're not as likely to burn. That being said, after you kind of build up your solar callus, use the D-Minder Pro app. When you're a beginner, that'll help you track like how much time you should actually be outside. But once you've kind of gotten kind of your fix for the sun for the day, do what the animals do. You hide in the shade, or you just put a physical blocker on, large hat, throw on long sleeve shirts. That's basically what I'll do when I'm down in Mexico. Is I'll go out in the morning time, soak up a bunch of sun, and then go hide in a cabana from like 10 to 2 or so. You're still getting some benefit from the light, reflecting off the ground and the water and such. But your example, if you're out all day, you're stuck in the middle of a boat, that's a different story. Maybe you are going to cover up a little bit. Maybe you might need to use some sunscreen, at that point, but it's not an everyday occurrence. Or at least get your sunlight on your skin first before you put anything on it. I don't have a favorite brand of quote sunscreen, but you probably want to be using something like zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, a actual physical blocker that would bounce the rays off you versus something that is a chemical blocker. Here's another question. How much does it do to see the sunrise at this time of year here in St. Louis? I rarely can see the sunrise here. So, as I tell many people, my number one health tip is see every single sunrise for every single day the rest of your life. I've been doing this for over 2 years. It's the best health tip that I've given myself. It helps set your rhythms. Your sleep will improve. Everything in your hormone panel will likely improve if you do this. Now, definitely in St. Louis, it's been gray more days than I like, and that's one of the reasons I have to escape south every once in a while in the winter. But even if you cannot see the direct sun breaking the horizon, the color of the sky is beneficial for your circadian rhythms getting reset. Now, for people who say they're quote night owls, yes, there are certain night owls that aren't going to see the sunrise. The sun rises right now in St. Louis about 7:15 or so in the morning. For more optimal, the goal would be get up before sunrise, go out and see it for 20 minutes, and then go back inside. And if you're really still tired, go back to bed. It's that signal that sets your clock for the day. So it's that important. All right, here's a question here. Thoughts on different types of salts? Not an expert on it, but you want to be avoiding things that have fluoride in it. Fluoride is a dielectric blocker, prevents your water inside your mitochondria from storing as much energy. So typically the kind of Celtic sea salt is probably what I'd probably say would be my go-to salt. I used to say Himalayan, but be careful. There's some thoughts that there might be some plastics and other things in Himalayan salt, so I personally don't use anymore. So I would go with sea salt if I was picking something like that. Is there a benefit to tanning at a salon? A big caveat of possibly. It really depends on what type of tanning equipment that place uses. Not so much from an infection standpoint, but more from an electromagnetic frequency standpoint. I don't know the different tanning bed companies per se, but this would be a case where before I would jump on somebody's bed, I would bring one of my EMF meters and test it myself to see what the electrical fields are coming off of it, because you don't want to microwave yourself with a bunch of EMFs when you're getting the beneficial UV radiation. So possibly, but you'd have to test. And I've done previous talks on EMF meters and such and how to use them, but I'm definitely not an expert in it, but it's pretty straightforward. You get a meter, you test if it looks red, you probably don't want to get in that thing. Question, somebody's new to red light therapy. I've been using mine 2 to 3 times a day. What are the best times a day to use a red light therapy unit? Great question. So photobiomodulation is how you use light to optimize your biology, is kind of the way I tend to say it. But a couple caveats is, yes, my room is red right now, but I'm not doing red light therapy. When you're actually getting a treatment, you're much closer to the device. It's kind of like the power of a garden hose versus a fire hose. If you're way far away from it, you're not getting many photons interacting with the electrons in your cells. So typically, I'd recommend do it in a circadian manner. Use the red light devices from sun up to sun down. Whenever the sun is up, there's always red light present. So you're not going to harm your circadian rhythms by using red light when the sun is out. There are some people that, using a very intense light, even if it's red light at night, will impact their sleep. So for most people, I would not recommend doing a lot of photobiomodulation close to bedtime. As for frequency, it really depends on what you're treating, but 3 times a day probably is excessive for most things. It's usually once or twice a day, ballpark somewhere between 5 and 20 minutes, depending on what you're treating. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. It's how do you figure out the dose? This time I had a conversation with a company today that was interested in having a conversation with me sometime about heart health and photoball modulation. I told them the biggest challenge is, how do you control the different devices for, how best to recommend doses for people, because it depends on how close you are to the device, what the intensity of the device setting is, and a couple other metrics. The frequencies, the lights the actual colors of lights have a different impact for different cells. So it is a little bit more complicated than just telling everybody to use it for 20 minutes. But for most part, you don't want to do more than what's necessary, because there is a biphasic response, meaning no red light, no benefit, a little red light, you're not getting benefit. There's a Goldilocks that works, and then you do too much and you start losing the benefit. Uncommonly that you would, quote, injure yourself. You'd have to do a whole lot of red light therapy to start injuring yourself. But yeah, if you're using it too much, you might lose the benefits of what you're trying to do. All right. Very good questions, guys. Thanks for asking them tonight. And next week, I think I'm going to talk about exercise, how to best do it from a standpoint of health span longevity. I was never a professional athlete. I wasn't even that good of a college athlete. I played lacrosse in college, also played some tennis. So I do have some fitness background, but definitely not somebody who can coach a world-class athlete. But I can give you some ideas on what you should be doing for longevity, and that's kind of the game I'm focusing on right now. There's a doctor I follow, Dr. Peter Attia. If you don't follow him, highly recommend you follow his podcast called The Drive. He's also somewhat active on Instagram, but he has something he calls the Centenarian Olympics. He's training for activities when he's 100 years old. He wants to get down and lay on the floor and play with his great-grandkids and be able to get up off the floor using one hand. He wants to be able to pick up a suitcase, put over his head, and put it in the carry-on bins in an airplane. So he's training for those particular type of activities. He's not doing long-distance cycling or swimming anymore, because that is an activity and not something that isn't great for longevity. But anyway, we'll be talking about kind of what I'm currently doing for my exercise routine, and some of my kind of things I plan to start expanding into this year. There's a question here. I read before bed on an e-reader. Should I wear some glasses such as the ones I'm wearing? If so, what kind? Thanks. So I'll give you the ideal answer and then what is practical. So the ideal answer is after sunset, you wouldn't use any backlit devices. You wouldn't use anything with a screen, ideally, and you would just read off of a regular paper if at all possible. But then you gotta be careful what lighting you're using to light it up. I can tell you it's fairly hard to read with red lighting, reading a paper book. But I do have an e-reader. I have one of the wasn't the original initially, but I basically got one of the lowest cost Kindles that doesn't have backlighting. So if it's dark at night, I can't read the thing. So I only use it basically when I go to the beach or travel, and I can just read it when it's in natural lighting. But if you're going to use the screen after dark, which almost everybody's doing, and everybody's probably doing right now, is you want to at least be protecting your eyes so that your brain gets a signal what time of day it is. So there's different manufacturers that make glasses that filter out different wavelengths of light. It gets a little bit complicated, but a rough estimate is during the daytime, you want to have glasses that are blocking up to 450 nanometers. So your glasses are going to be slightly yellow to block some of the blue light. In the evening time, ideally, you would switch to a pair that would block up to 550 nanometers. So your glasses are going to start being red. You don't absolutely need the red glasses, but your sleep quality tends to improve if you switch to the red glasses at least an hour before you go to bed. Personally, they make me too tired, so I don't wear them more than an hour before I go to bed. But some people, it's probably wise to put on after sunset to start telling your brain, hey, it's nighttime. Start getting ready to go to sleep in a couple hours. There's a couple different manufacturers of them. I don't recommend one particular per se, but if you go to my website, drtwyman.com, drtwyman.com, I have a list of the kind of the 4 companies I usually recommend. All right, got a couple other people joining. Usually I chat for about 30 minutes Monday evenings at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. I will stick around for a little bit longer and answer any questions that keep rolling in. But I do thank you guys for your attention. It's always a pleasure to answer your questions. And again, next week I'll be chatting about exercise. The week after that, I'll be chatting about stress relieving techniques, kind of go back to the heart rate variability that we chatted about a couple weeks ago. And then we'll get into some other topics starting in February. There's a question asking, somebody wears reading glasses. Can I get yellow and red reading glasses? Yes, many of these companies will make those for you. Another kind of hack for it is buy whatever glasses that you want to get. Go to your local drugstore, and they make those stickers that have different reading magnifiers on them. You basically just take your glasses, put the stickers on the glasses, and then make your own pair of readers. So that's sometimes more of an economical proposition than buying absolute prescription glasses. But be my guest if you want to buy prescription ones. Many of these companies will make them for you. All right. I don't think any other questions are coming in at the moment, and that's great. Thank you again, everybody, for joining tonight. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week from sunny Cancun. So take care.